My daughter's graduation party was supposed to be the proudest night of my life. Instead, it became the night my ex-wife's new husband got arrested in front of 200 guests. Let me back up. I walked away from a 31-year marriage and moved to Belize. 6 weeks later, my ex-wife married a man she'd known for 4 months. A so-called tech entrepreneur. My own son gave the rehearsal dinner speech. Called him brilliant, called him the father figure he always wished he'd had. I was 1,800 miles away, learning how to sleep through the night without chest pain. Then, at my daughter's medical school graduation party, a quiet woman in a linen blazer stood up and asked the new husband one question. Just one. The champagne glasses stopped clinking. Conversations died mid-sentence. Within 72 hours, that moment had 6 million views on TikTok. And 3 days after that, my ex-wife called me at 4 in the morning, hysterical, asking me to wire her $40,000. Thank you for being here, every single one of you. Before we get into this, quick question. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city, your state, your country in the comments. I love seeing how far this community stretches. And fair warning, this story contains fictionalized elements for educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental. But the lessons underneath, the truth at the core, that part is absolutely real. Now let's get into it. My name is Russell Keane. I'm 63 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered that the quietest exit can create the loudest justice. It started in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a house I'd built with my own plans. Not literally, but I'd sketched the layout on graph paper during my lunch breaks back in 1998. 5 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a workshop in the back where I restored old furniture. Colonial style on 2 acres, backing up to a creek. My ex-wife Janet picked the paint colors, chose the landscaping company, hired the decorator. I paid for it. That was our arrangement, though nobody ever called it that. 31 years. I spent 31 years in a marriage where my primary function was funding someone else's image of success. I was a senior risk analyst at Pinnacle Financial Group for 26 years. Quiet work, spreadsheets, probability models, stress tests. I was good at it because I understood one thing most people don't. Numbers don't have feelings, and they don't lie. People do. Janet was not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. She was a woman who believed that appearance was reality. If the house looked perfect, the marriage was perfect. The marriage was perfect. If the Christmas card photo was beautiful, the family was beautiful. I was the one variable she couldn't stage manage, and it drove her crazy. By year 20, she'd stopped asking about my day. By year 25, she introduced me at parties as my husband. He works in finance, with a tone that suggested finance was something mildly embarrassing, like a skin condition. By year 28, we hadn't eaten dinner together on a weeknight in 3 months. We had 2 kids. Megan, 32, finishing her surgical residency at Johns Hopkins. Brilliant, brutally honest, saw through her mother's performance before she turned 15. And Dylan, 28, marketing manager at a tech startup in Charlotte. Sharp kid, genuinely talented, but he'd absorbed Janet's worldview like a sponge, absorbs water, completely, silently, without questioning the source. The hard episode came on a Tuesday in March. I was at my desk running a Monte Carlo simulation on a client's bond portfolio when my left hand went numb, then my jaw, then this pressure in my chest like someone had parked a truck on my sternum. The paramedics used words like warning event and significant arterial stress. My cardiologist, a woman about my daughter's age, sat on the edge of my hospital bed and spoke slowly, like she was explaining something to a child who needed to hear it. Mr. Keane, your heart is not failing, but it is telling you something. You're 61 years old, your cortisol levels are through the roof, and your resting heart rate suggests your body thinks it's running from a predator 24 hours a day. What exactly are you running from? I stared at the ceiling, fluorescent lights, acoustic tile, the hum of machines keeping track of whether I was alive. Megan drove down from Baltimore, sat in the chair beside my bed for 6 hours, didn't push, didn't lecture, just held my hand and read a novel while I pretended to sleep. Dylan texted, "Mom says you're being dramatic. Feel better. Busy week." That was it. The entire message. 12 words, no punctuation except the periods his phone auto-inserted. Janet came on day 2, brought flowers, which was nice, then spent 40 minutes on the phone in my room discussing a kitchen island renovation with her contractor. When she hung up, she looked at me and said, "The doctor says you can come home Thursday. Try not to make this into a whole thing." A whole thing. 3 decades of marriage, a cardiac event, and I was making it into a whole thing. The discharge nurse, a guy named Ray with kind eyes and a firm handshake, walked me to the elevator. He didn't say much. Just, "Mr. Keane, sometimes the heart attack that doesn't kill you is the one that saves your life. You understand what I'm saying?" I understood. Driving home, I took the back roads through Wake County, dogwoods blooming, red clay shoulders. I'd built a career quantifying risk for other people. I'd run 10,000 simulations on markets, on credit defaults, on catastrophic scenarios, but I'd never once run the numbers on my own life. So I did. Right there, parked on a dirt shoulder beside a tobacco field, I did the math. If I stayed, my projected outcome was more of the same. Declining health, emotional isolation, death in a house where I was furniture. If I left, the variables changed entirely. That night, Janet was at her book club. I sat in my workshop, sawdust on my hands, and opened a blank spreadsheet. Old habits. I titled it Exit Strategy and started building the model. I gave myself 4 months, April through July. My retirement package and savings totaled $2.9 million after taxes. I'd been managing investments quietly for years. Janet never asked about our finances beyond confirming that her credit cards worked. That was my department. Being invisible was my department. I established a revocable trust, put $1.4 million into it with Megan as trustee. Janet's name appeared nowhere in the documents. Another $600,000 went into a brokerage account structured for international access. My pension from Pinnacle would generate $3,200 monthly. Belize's qualified retired persons program required proof of $2,000 monthly income from a source outside the country. I qualified easily. The house was the complicated part. Worth $1.1 million. I paid it off in 2019. I took out a home equity line of credit, $490,000. Janet co-signed without reading anything. She never read anything I put in front of her. Finances were my department. I left her the house, the HELOC payment, both vehicles, and every piece of furniture she'd ever curated. The house still had $620,000 in equity, but now it also had a $490,000 debt that required monthly payments of $300. Payments she'd need income to cover. Belize. I'd been thinking about it for years. Found a rental house online in Placencia, a fishing village on a peninsula in the south. 2 bedrooms, ocean breeze, a dock where I could fish every morning. $1,600 a month. I set up international banking, researched health insurance options, bought a one-way ticket. June. I told Megan everything over a weekend visit to Baltimore. Showed her the trust documents, the timeline, the plan. She listened the way she does. Eyes steady, processing. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, you should have done this 10 years ago. Dylan's gonna hate you for a while." "I know. He'll come around. He's not stupid. He's just loyal to the wrong version of the story." I didn't tell Dylan. At 28, he still repeated Janet's talking points like they were facts. Dad's emotionally unavailable. Dad doesn't care about family. Dad only cares about numbers. Her words coming out of his mouth perfectly preserved. Divorce papers filed through my attorney in Raleigh. Janet would be served the morning after I left. July 18th. A Friday. I woke at 4:30 a.m., dressed in the dark. 2 suitcases and the carry-on. 31 years reduced to 60 pounds of luggage. I left the divorce papers on the kitchen counter, house keys on top, a note underneath. "Everything in the house is yours. The HELOC payment is due August 1st. Contact the attorney for details. I'm sorry it came to this. Russell." The Uber arrived at 5:15. I closed the front door and stood on that wraparound porch for exactly 10 seconds. Listened to the creak behind the house. The Cardinals were already singing. Then I walked to the car and didn't look back. At RDU, I called Megan. "It's done." "Good." Text me when you land. I'll handle things here. The flight went through Miami, 7 hours total. Somewhere over the Caribbean, drinking a ginger ale because my doctor said no more coffee, I watched the water turn from grey-green to turquoise through the window. My chest didn't hurt. My jaw wasn't tight. I wasn't carrying 31 years anymore. By the time Janet found my note, I was clearing customs in Belize City. She called Megan screaming. Megan explained what she could. Dylan called me twice. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that was equal parts confusion and rage. 3 minutes of "How could you?" and "Mom is devastated and you're a coward." I listened to it once, then deleted it. I'd spent 3 decades being enough for Janet. I wouldn't spend another hour defending my right to exist on my own terms. 9 months later, my daughter's graduation would force me back into the story I'd left behind. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was the sound of waves and the feeling of a man breathing without permission for the first time in decades. The Belize mornings started with frigate birds and the smell of salt and coconut oil from the restaurant next door. 9 months in, I'd become someone I didn't recognize. Someone calm. My house in Placencia had wooden shutters and the hammock on the porch where I'd read for hours. No schedule. No performance reviews. No one correcting my pronunciation or sighing at my existence. Mornings I'd fish off the dock, caught snapper mostly, sometimes barracuda. Gave half to my neighbor, a retired teacher from Michigan named Stan who'd moved down 8 years ago and never looked back. Afternoons I'd walk to a cafe run by a Belizean woman named Rosa who made the best rice and beans I'd ever tasted, and never once asked why a 62-year-old American was living alone in a fishing village. That's what I loved about Belize. Nobody needed your backstory. I'd taken up furniture restoration again. Set up a small workshop in my spare bedroom. Refinished a mahogany table I'd found at a yard sale. My blood pressure dropped to 118/72. Lost 25 pounds. Slept like the dead every night. The $600,000 in investments was managed conservatively, generating about $42,000 annually. Expenses ran $2,100 a month. With my pension, I was more than comfortable. I was free. A word I hadn't used to describe myself since my 20s. Megan called every Sunday, thriving at Hopkins. Final year of residency. She'd started dating a trauma surgeon named Sean. Good man. Steady. Dylan hadn't called once in 9 months. Megan said he was angry but starting to ask questions. Starting to wonder if maybe Janet's version wasn't the whole story. Progress. That's when the muse arrived. January. I was replacing hinges on a cabinet door when Megan called on a Wednesday, which was unusual. Her Sunday calls were ritual. A Wednesday call meant something had happened. Dad, Mom got married. I set down my screwdriver. When? Why, Saturday. I found out from Dylan's Instagram. She didn't tell me. Didn't invite me. Full ceremony at the Umstead Hotel in Carrie. 180 guests. I wasn't one of them. Who's the groom? His name is Lance Prescott. He calls himself a tech entrepreneur. Runs something called Prescott Innovations. Claims he develops AI software for healthcare companies. Dylan's been interning for him for 3 months. That's how they met. Lance hired Dylan, then started dating Mom. I sat down on my porch step. Let that settle. How old is this guy? 44, 18 years younger than Mom. Mild curiosity. That was all. Like hearing that a restaurant you used to eat at changed its menu. You note it and move on. But then Megan said something that changed everything. Dad, Dylan quit his job. He's working for Lance full-time now. And he invested $80,000 into Prescott Innovations. His entire savings, plus a personal loan. My chest tightened. Not cardiac this time. Parental. Megan, what do you know about this company? That's why I'm calling. Sean's brother is a securities attorney in D.C. I asked him to run a basic check. Dad, Prescott Innovations has no product, no software, no clients. It's registered as an LLC in Delaware, which isn't unusual, but it has no unusual. But it has no employees on record, no patent filings, no contracts, nothing. The website is beautiful. Testimonials from healthcare executives, case studies, awards. All fabricated. Sean's brother couldn't verify a single claim. I closed my eyes. Felt the Caribbean breeze on my face. Listened to the waves. There's more, Megan said. Lance Prescott's real name is Lance Portnoy. He changed it legally in 2020. Before that, he ran a company in Atlanta called MedSync Solutions. Same pitch. AI for healthcare. Raised $3.2 million from investors between 2017 and 2019. The company dissolved in 2020. Investors got nothing. The Georgia Secretary of State's office has an open file on him. He was never charged, but the complaints are all public record. How many investors? 22 that we can identify. Mostly professionals in their 50s and 60s. Doctors, small business owners, retirees. Average investment around $145,000. Some people put in their retirement savings. Silence on the line. Dad, Dylan is in deep. He's not just investing, he's recruiting. He brought in 3 of his friends from Charlotte. They've each put in $30,000 to $50,000. Dylan genuinely believes in this. Dylan genuinely believes in this. Lance has him completely convinced. I stood up, walked to the end of my dock, looked out at the reef line where the water changed color. I'd spent 26 years identifying financial risk. I knew what a fraud looked like, the way a doctor knows what a tumor looks like, not from theory, from pattern recognition, from seeing it 100 times the same structure wearing different clothes. Lance Prescott was running a textbook affinity fraud, targeting people through social connections, country club networks, church groups, family, using trust instead of due diligence. It works because people don't investigate the people they love, and my son was about to become collateral damage, not just his money, his reputation. When this collapsed, and it would collapse, Dylan's name would be attached. The friends he'd recruited would blame him. His career in marketing would be over before it started. I couldn't stop Janet from making bad choices. She'd earned that right when she signed divorce papers without reading them, the same way she'd signed the HELOC. But Dylan was my son, and he was standing in the path of a train he couldn't see. I spent 3 days researching, not from anger, not from jealousy, from the cold, methodical discipline of a risk analyst who'd spent 3 decades reading balance sheets and could see what was missing as clearly as what was there. Georgia Secretary of State records confirmed everything Megan's source had found. MedSync Solutions dissolved with $3.2 million in investor funds unaccounted for. 7 formal complaints filed, no criminal charges because Lance had structured things carefully. Promissory notes instead of securities, technically not investment contracts under Georgia law, a lawyer's trick. But North Carolina was different. North Carolina has stricter securities statutes. And some of what Dylan was doing, recruiting investors, presenting financial projections, collecting funds that looked a lot like acting as an unregistered securities broker. My son could face criminal liability and not even know it. I called Megan that night. Dad, she said before I could speak, I've been thinking the same thing. We need to get him out. I've tried. He won't listen to me. Says I'm jealous of Mum's happiness. That's a direct quote from Janet, by the way. I know the source. So what do we do? I was quiet for a moment, watching the lights of fishing boats on the horizon. Megan, your graduation ceremony is in May. Yeah, May 17th. And the party afterward, you said Janet insisted on throwing it. Of course she did. She wants the photo op. Her daughter the surgeon. She's already picked the venue. The Carolina Inn in Chapel Hill. 200 guests. She's bringing Lance. She wants to show him off. And Dylan will be there, obviously. Then that's where we do this. Not in private, where Lance can spin it. Not in a letter Dylan won't read. In a room full of people who need to hear the truth. Silence. Then slowly, what are you thinking? I'm thinking I know someone who spent 30 years at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Someone who investigated exactly this kind of fraud. And she owes me a favor. The woman's name was Alma Navarro. Retired IRS Special Agent. 71 years old. She looked like someone's favorite aunt. Silver-streaked hair, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of face that made juries lean forward and listen. I'd worked with her 15 years ago when Pinnacle Financial had flagged suspicious transactions from a client. She'd investigated, found a $14 million embezzlement scheme, and testified with the calm precision of a watchmaker, never raised a voice, never showed emotion, just laid out facts until the truth was undeniable. I called her from my dock at sunset. Russell Keane, the risk analyst with the conscience. Her voice was warm, exact. I heard you ran away to an island. Peninsula, technically. Listen, Alma, I need a favor. I explained everything. Not a scheme, not sabotage, prevention, someone credible in a room full of potential victims, asking questions that made people curious enough to verify for themselves. She was quiet for a long time. Then, send me everything. Court records, corporate filings, the Georgia complaints, investor names if you have them. I'll review it. I sent it all. 2 days later, she called back. Russell, this is textbook. I investigated dozens of these at IRSCI. Same structure every time. Charismatic founder, fake credentials, affinity targeting, promissory notes instead of securities to dodge regulation. Your son is acting as an unregistered broker. He's exposed. If this unravels before someone intervenes, and it will unravel, he's looking at civil liability at minimum, possibly criminal. Can you be at a party in Chapel Hill on May 17th? I can be anywhere. Facts need to be spoken. How do I get in? Megan handled logistics. Alma would attend as Dr. Navarro, a retired colleague of Megan's department chair. Medical professionals love titles. Nobody questions a doctor at a doctor's party. The weeks crawled. I kept my routine. Fishing, furniture, Spanish lessons from a Guatemalan tutor twice a week. My body was calm. My mind was not. 3 weeks before the graduation, my phone rang at an unusual hour. Dylan. Second call since I'd left. First one had been that voicemail full of rage. This one was different. Dad. Formal. Distant, like calling a number from a business card he'd found in a drawer. Dylan. I wanted you to know that I'm doing really well. Lance made me VP of Business Development, with closing a $5 million round next month. He and Mom are happy. She's happy for the first time in years, Dad. He sees her. He values her. He's everything. The pause hung there. Everything you weren't. I'm glad your mother's happy. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you abandoned your family and moved to a third world country to feel sorry for yourself. I gripped the porch railing, breathed, watched a pelican dive. Dylan, you're good at your job because you understand marketing. You know how to read a pitch deck. You know the difference between a real product and vaporware. Apply that skill to Prescott Innovations. Go to the Georgia Secretary of State's website. Search for MedSync Solutions. Read what you find. Silence. Then defensive. What's that supposed to mean? It means I love you enough to say something you don't want to hear. Check the foundation before you build on it. I don't need financial advice from a man who quit his own life. The line went dead. I sat in the dark listening to the tide come in. My dinner was cold. The evening was beautiful. My chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with my heart. Megan texted an hour later. He called you? Yeah. I'm sorry, he's not ready yet, but he will be. May 17th. Graduation day. I flew in the night before. First time back in the States in 11 months. The air smelled different. Heavier, like obligation. Megan's ceremony was at 10 a.m. I sat in the third row, cried when they called her name, cried harder when she found me in the crowd and pointed. My daughter, the surgeon, the one who saw clearly, who chose truth over comfort, who held my hand in a hospital room when her mother was picking countertops. The party started at 6 p.m. at the Carolina Inn. White tablecloths, string quartet, open bar. Janet had outdone herself. This was her production, and she was directing it flawlessly. I wasn't supposed to be there. Janet had made that clear through her attorney, but Megan had added my name to the guest list herself. It's my graduation, Mom, my guest list. I arrived at 6:15, kept to the periphery, spoke to Megan's friends, her professors. Avoided Janet, who was across the room in a blue dress, Lance's arm around her waist, holding court like she was accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award. Lance Prescott was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, handsome in a manufactured way, perfect teeth, tailored suit, the kind of tan that comes from a booth, not the sun. He worked the room like a politician. Firm handshakes, eye contact that lasted exactly the right amount of time, compliments calibrated to each person's insecurity. Dylan was beside him, my son, following Lance around like an apprentice following a master, introducing him to Megan's medical school classmates. Future doctors, future earners, future targets. My stomach turned. Alma Navarro arrived at 6:40. Linen blazer, pearl earrings, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She looked exactly like what she was pretending to be, a retired academic at a colleague celebration. Megan introduced her to Janet as a former department mentor. Janet shook her hand without curiosity. Never questioned anything that flattered her daughter. Alma worked the room for an hour. Quiet conversations, gentle questions. She talked to Lance for 20 minutes near the bar. He showed her his phone, swiping through screenshots of his company's dashboard. Growth metrics, client logos, revenue projections. She nodded, asked follow-up questions with the mild interest of someone making polite conversation. She was cataloguing everything. Megan texted me updates from across the room. 7:42 p.m. Alma just talked to 3 of Dylan's Charlotte friends. They mentioned their investments. She asked about documentation. They said Lance handles everything through personal accounts, no escrow, no third-party custodian. She almost smiled. 7:58 p.m. Dylan's giving a toast soon. He's going to talk about Lance, about their partnership. 8:33 p.m. Dylan stood up, clinked his glass. The room quieted. I want to toast my sister, who's going to save lives. But I also want to toast the man who changed mine. Lance Prescott took a chance on me when I was lost. Gave me purpose. Gave my mom happiness. He's a visionary, a builder, and I'm proud to call him family. He looked directly at me when he said that last word. I held his gaze. Didn't flinch. 8:15 p.m. Megan walked to the microphone. Thanked everyone. Thanked everyone. Thanked her professors, her classmates, her mother for the beautiful party. Then she said, before we continue, my mentor, Dr. Navarro, wanted to say a few words about the value of due diligence, something we learn early in medicine. I think it applies to everything. Alma stood up, walked to the microphone without hurrying. She let silence settle the way I'd watched her do in a courtroom 15 years ago. Professional technique, the room's attention locked. Thank you, Megan, and congratulations. In medicine, we learn something on the first day that applies to every area of life. Trust, but verify. The patient tells you they feel fine, you still run the labs, because what you can see isn't always what's real. She paused, looked around the room with warm eyes. I spent 30 years at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, old habits. So when I hear about exciting new companies, I can't help myself. I check. She turned toward Lance. Her tone didn't change. Still warm, still conversational. Lance, your combinational. Lance, your company, Prescott Innovations, claims partnerships with 4 major hospital systems. I couldn't find a single contract, filing, or press release confirming any of them. Your website lists a proprietary AI platform. There are no patent applications, no trademark filings, no technical documentation anywhere in the public record. You claim $12 million in annual revenue. Your company's Delaware filing shows no employees and no registered agent as of last quarter. The room shifted. Not dramatically, subtly. The way a current changes direction underwater. Before founding Prescott Innovations, you operated a company in Atlanta called MedSync Solutions under the name Lance Portnoy. That company raised $3.2 million from 22 investors. It dissolved in 2020. Investors received nothing. 7 formal complaints were filed with the Georgia Secretary of State. The file is still open. Phones came out. Slowly at first, then all at once. Fingers moving across screens. Several young people in this room have invested personal savings into Prescott Innovations based on financial projections that, as far as public records show, have no foundation. Some of them may be acting as unregistered securities brokers without knowing the legal implications. She looked at Dylan, then at me, then back at the room. I don't say this to embarrass anyone. I say it because, in my experience, the kindest thing you can do for someone is tell them the truth before the truth tells itself. Fraud doesn't announce itself. It seduces, it flatters, it makes you feel chosen. And by the time you see it clearly, your savings are gone and your name is on documents you never should have signed. She raised a glass. To Megan, who dedicated her life to healing. To everyone in this room, may you always verify before you trust, because foundations always reveal themselves. It's only a matter of time. Silence. Complete. The string quartet had stopped playing, no one moved, then chaos. Phones lit up across the room. Google searches. Georgia Secretary of State website loading on 50 screens simultaneously. Someone near the bar said, "Oh my God, it's all here." Lance's face went white, then red. He started toward Alma. Two of Megan's classmates, both former college athletes, stepped between them without being asked. Janet stood frozen. A blue dress, her perfect hair, a beautiful party, all of it suddenly a set for a show no one wanted to watch anymore. She looked at Lance. He looked at the door. Dylan didn't move. He stood with his champagne glass still raised, mid-toast position, watching the man he'd called a visionary check for exits. I watched my son's face, the exact moment it changed. The exact moment 11 months of certainty collapsed into something raw and terrible and necessary. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. Lance left through the kitchen. Janet followed him, heels clicking on tile. She was calling his name. He didn't stop. Megan found me by the garden door. "Are you okay?" "No. But this was right." "I know. Go find your brother." She did. The aftermath took weeks. Within 48 hours, 3 of Dylan's Charlotte friends filed complaints with the North Carolina Secretary of State. The Securities Division opened a formal investigation into Prescott Innovations. Within a week, Lance's accounts were frozen. The beautiful website went dark overnight. His social media disappeared, but screenshots were already circulating on Reddit and Twitter. Someone created a thread titled "Tech Bro Exposed at Med School Graduation by Retired IRS Agent" that hit the front page. Alma's line about foundations became a meme, printed on coffee mugs. Someone even embroidered it on a throw pillow and posted it to Etsy. Dylan's $80,000 was gone. The personal loan remained. His 3 friends from Charlotte lost a combined $120,000. They weren't angry at Dylan, not yet, but the friendships were strained in ways that might never fully heal. Janet's situation unraveled systematically. Lance had been living in a townhouse rented in her name. He put both cars in her name. When he vanished, she was left with $14,000 in debt she didn't know existed, and a lease she couldn't afford on her part-time income from the interior design consultancy she'd started after the divorce. The house I'd left her, the one with the HELOC, she'd sold it 8 months earlier, paid off the $490,000 line of credit and netted $620,000. Lance had convinced her to invest $400,000 of that into Prescott Innovations. That money was gone. She'd burned through most of the remaining $220,000 on the wedding and her lifestyle. She was functionally broke. That's when she called me. 4 a.m. Belize time. I was already awake. Couldn't sleep after a day of replaying Dylan's face in my mind. "You did this." Her voice was raw. Not angry anymore. Past anger. Somewhere in the territory of complete dissolution. "You sent that woman. You planned this." I let her talk. The accusations. The tears. The blame. When she finally ran out of words, I spoke quietly. "Janet, everything that woman said is public record. Anyone with an internet connection can find it. Someone eventually would have. I'm just glad it happened before more people got hurt. I put everything into his company, Russell. Everything. The house money. My savings. He said it would triple in 2 years." "I know." What am I supposed to do? I can't answer that for you, but Megan can help you make a plan. Long silence. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down, walked to my dock, watched the first light touch the water. Somewhere in North Carolina, the life Janet had built on appearance was collapsing under the weight of reality, and I felt no triumph, just a deep, weary sadness for a woman who never learned to read the fine print. 3 weeks later, Dylan called. His voice was different. Smaller. The sharp edges filed down by something I recognized because I'd felt it myself. Humility that comes from realizing you were wrong about everything. Dad. Dylan. Long pause. I could hear him breathing. Lance is gone, completely. FBI picked up the case from the state investigation. Turns out he's done this in 3 states. Georgia, Florida, North Carolina. Total investor loss is over $8 million. They're calling it a serial affinity fraud, I know. Megan told me. I lost everything, the $80,000. My job. My friends aren't returning my calls. I told them to invest. I vouched for him. I brought them in. Silence. Why didn't you just tell me directly? Why the public thing? I tried, Dylan. I told you to check the Georgia records. You told me I was a man who quit his own life. Long silence. I could hear something breaking in it, something that needed to break. You were right. About all of it. About Lance. About Mom. About needing to leave. I spent 11 months defending her version of reality because it was easier than admitting you had reasons to go. But you did. You had every reason. My eyes burned. I sat down on the dock, put my feet in the water. I'm sorry, Dad, for the voicemail, for not calling, for choosing her story over yours, for calling you a coward when you were the only one who had the guts to walk away. Dylan. Yeah? The door's always open, whenever you're ready. He visited 6 weeks later. We spent 2 weeks together in Placentia. Fished off the dock. Refinished a rocking chair together. Didn't talk about anything important for the first 3 days, then talked about everything. Slowly, honestly, like 2 people learning a new language. He asked me questions he'd never asked before. About the marriage, about why I stayed so long, about the heart episode. I answered all of them. Didn't sugarcoat. Didn't vilify Janet, just told the truth, which turned out to be complicated enough without embellishment. On his last night we sat on the porch drinking Bellican beers and watching the stars. More stars than you ever see in Charlotte or Raleigh. The Milky Way like a river of light. Dad, I want to fix things with the guys in Charlotte, the ones who lost money because of me. That's going to take time. I know, but I need to try. I recommended him. That's on me. I looked at my son, 28 years old, sitting in the wreckage of his own poor judgment, not running from it, not blaming anyone else, sitting in it. That right there, I said. That's the difference between a mistake and a character flaw. Mistakes you own. Character flaws you justify. He nodded, finished his beer. Can I come back next month? You can come back whenever you want. 14 months later. I'm sitting on the same dock where I made that phone call to Alma Navarro. The water hasn't changed. The frigate birds still circle at dawn. But everything else has. Lance Prescott, born Lance Portnoy, was indicted on 23 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering in October. His trial lasted 4 weeks. Guilty on all counts. Sentenced to 12 years federal prison. Investors across 3 states recovered 31 cents on the dollar through asset liquidation. Not enough. Never enough. But something. Janet moved back to Ohio, lives with a sister in a small town outside of Toledo, works as an office manager at a dental practice, $39,000 a year. Her social circle, the Raleigh Country Club set, the book club, the dinner party circuit, all of it evaporated the moment the money did. She called Megan once asking for help. Megan helped her build a budget, set up a payment plan for her debts, didn't give her money, gave her something harder, the truth about her situation, and a realistic plan forward. Dylan went through a brutal year. Reputation damage in Charlotte's marketing world. Lost clients who'd seen the graduation video. Started therapy. Learned words like enmeshment and codependency and boundary, hard words that opened doors to easier rooms. He met a woman named Kira in September, physical therapist, born and raised in Asheville, grounded in a way that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with character. They're not engaged yet, but she visited Belize with him last month. She caught a bigger fish than both of us combined and never let us forget it. Megan finished her residency, accepted a position at Duke, married Sean last fall in a small ceremony on the Outer Banks. I walked her down the aisle on a beach at sunset, sand in my dress shoes, whined in her veil. I cried like I hadn't cried since the day she was born. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thanks for still being here, Dad. As for me, my health is the best it's been since my 40s. Blood pressure 114/70, resting heart rate 62. No cardiac event since the one that saved my life. My days have a rhythm now. Fish in the morning, workshop in the afternoon, Spanish and Creole lessons twice a week. I can argue about football, real football, with the locals at Rosa's Cafe. I built a community here. Expat friends, Belizean neighbors, a poker game every Thursday night that I lose more often than I win. My investments have grown to $720,000, generate $46,000 annually. Expenses run $26,000. I'm comfortable and secure, words I couldn't use to describe my marriage. I feel no bitterness toward Janet. True indifference is quieter than people imagine. No guilt about leaving. Pride in my children that fills rooms. No romantic relationship by choice. I'm not lonely. I'm complete. People ask if I'm happy. The question feels too small for what I've found. I'm at peace because I chose myself when everything and everyone said I shouldn't. Because I stopped making myself smaller to fit inside someone else's frame. Justice isn't revenge. Justice is simply truth, given a microphone at the right moment. Being alone isn't loneliness when you're finally, completely, undeniably free. Looking back, I realize I spent 31 years quantifying everyone else's risk while ignoring my own. I built probability models for billion-dollar portfolios but couldn't calculate the cost of staying in a marriage that was killing me one silent dinner at a time. I was wrong. We get one life, one body, one chance. And when we let other people consume those gifts in the name of loyalty, we're not being noble, we're being complicit in our own disappearance. Don't be like me. Don't wait for a cardiac event to hear what your body has been whispering for years. Don't waste decades hoping someone will suddenly see your value. They won't. Not because you're not valuable, but because some people measure worth in currencies you were never meant to trade in. The lesson I learned the hard way: verification isn't suspicion. It's love. Whether it's a marriage, a business partner, or a promise someone makes over champagne, check the foundation before you build your life on top of it. Public records don't lie. Patterns don't lie. Your body's warnings don't lie. Listen to them. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings wrapped in narrative. Each one carries lessons paid for with years of someone's life. That's why they matter. Wisdom earned the hard way, so yours doesn't have to be. If this resonated with you, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that challenge and transform. Thank you for staying until the end. I see you. Quick note, upcoming stories may contain fictionalized elements for educational purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to explore other content on the channel.